So if you watch my channel, you probably know already about my position about animal agriculture and its relationship to the climate crisis. And I've shown you memes that demonstrate this very clearly, what a tremendous influence it has on the climate emergency. Here in Australia, we don't seem to, well, our leaders, and I put that in quotes and use that very liberally, the leaders here, they like Scott Morrison, who's our Prime Minister, and I'm not sure how long I can sit in this outside here because of the it's starting to rain. So I'll try this again and see how long this lasts before I have to move inside. But so Scott Morrison, he's our Prime Minister, and a recent report on the 7:30 report said that a chief fire officer has tried to meet with Scott Morrison, our Prime Minister, to discuss that we need some sort of a plan for this climate emergency, because basically Australia is bursting into flames. And it really is. If you watch Twitter even, you see these hashtags, New South Wales fires, NSW fires or NSW bushfires. New South Wales is a state of Australia, and basically it's sort of bursting into flames all over the place. There's dozens of fires, and they're really, really crazy fires. We had this last year in the beginning of this year, 2019, in Tasmania. It was really, really awful, and I did some videos during that time, and it was pretty frightening for my first sort of introduction into Australian bushfires. And it was sort of we had to leave our house for we had to basically, they said it would probably be good if people evacuated here. Anyway, fortunately, the universe was smiling on us. It fortunately wasn't our time, but other people were not so lucky across the river. Anyway, so I know firsthand what this is like, these bushfires and in Australia. And so this particular one, these ones in New South Wales are dreadful. There are ones up in Queensland, which is the state above New South Wales, that are up near Noosa and around there. There are bushfires, I think, in Victoria, which is down below New South Wales. I mean, they're basically becoming almost an all-year thing, an all-year event. It's not, and we're only halfway through spring, really, in Australia. So it hasn't even hit summer, I mean, we will probably in Tasmania experience these bushfires again, because it's the summer period around January is very, very serious. So I mean, this is sort of an emergency, a climate emergency, just here in Australia, but it's globally. You see the Amazon going up, and that's due to mostly to animal agriculture. And I'm going to get to my point that I made in the beginning about animal agriculture. But animal agriculture in the Amazon rainforest clears about 1 to 2 acres. It's increased now. I've been talking about this for at least a decade. So have other vegans, that it's been clearing over the last decade, it's been clearing about 1 acre every minute of Amazon rainforest to make way for animal agriculture, for cows grazing, and also for soy to feed animals in feedlots in the United States and elsewhere. So it's actually sort of a double whammy. And now it's more than 2 acres a minute are being cleared, and that's with the go-ahead of Prime Minister Bolsonaro, who's the Prime Minister of Brazil. There are crazy wildfires that almost go on all year, half the year at least, in California. And this is where this fire chief went to California, and he was talking with the California fire people about this issue, and he recognizes that this is something that isn't going to get any better. And of course, Scott Morrison won't even meet him. This is the fire chief, won't even meet up with him to discuss a fire plan, because Scott Morrison is in complete denial, or is in intentional denial, because he's wanting to please his corporate rulers, and he wants to please the coal industry and all of that. He will not meet with people who are telling him that climate change is not only real, but it's actually Australia's bursting into flames, and this is not going to get any better. So this is sort of the leader, in quotes, that we have, running this country. And of course the Australian Labor Party, which is the other major party, even though we have a preferential voting system and there are more parties you can vote for during these federal elections, but the major party, the Australian Labor Party, is not much better. It thinks that it can have a foot in both camps. Only just recently, Albanese, the leader of the Australian Labor Party, the opposition, said that he thinks that you can have a renewable energies industry and have do the whole coal sort of thing industry as well, and so he wants a foot in both camps, and it's kind of it's sort of insane really. It's because the Labor Party, the Australian Labor Party, is a neoliberal party. It has lots of neoliberal policies, including awful asylum seeker policies and so forth, and it just does what the US wants in relation to their imperialist wars. And also the Liberal Party is just kind of like, well, one ex-prime minister who was a Liberal prime minister described them as authoritarian demagogues. I think that's, or authoritarian populists, something like that. He basically sort of, I would call them sort of like wannabe fascists is what I would call them, particularly one of the ministers, Peter Dutton, who is just dreadful. They're all so dreadful: racist, homophobes, transphobes, sexists, they're Islamophobes, you name it. They've cornered the market in discrimination, really. Cornered the market in also bowing down to corporations. And the Labor Party isn't so great either. It bows down to corporations. Now, I want to get back to the animal agriculture industry, because the animal agriculture industry, basically, its day is over. We have this old sort of tradition in Australia, unfortunately, which is sort of holding animal agriculture up. Farmers who do cow rearing and all this kind of stuff, we hold them up in this high esteem, and it's like this sort of nostalgia and all that kind of thing. And songs, have been written about them and all this kind of thing. Putting aside that animal agriculture is just exploitation for absolutely no reason whatsoever, because we don't need animal products at all to survive. We can easily meet all the nutrition requirements from plants and other non-animal sources. Putting that aside, the fact that, it doesn't, there are lots of traditions which, in the world, they used to be traditions like sacrificing people, sacrificing humans to the gods and all this sort of stuff. Cannibalism. There's all sorts of things that have been traditions in all over the world. Various peoples have had traditions that are no longer acceptable, really. And the same goes with exploiting animals. This is something that if we were going to be on the planet for another few thousand years or more, or even another 200 years, this would be looked back upon as a very dark time in human history of this ongoing exploitation of the vulnerable for completely trivial reasons. The torture and killing and trapping and baiting and drowning and the abuse and of hundreds of billions, trillions actually, trillions at this point every year. 1 to 3 trillion land and aquatic animals are tortured and killed every year. So what I'm trying to say is that there are traditions and things that we might have been used to that at some point need to be abandoned. They were never a good idea. They certainly weren't a good idea for non-human animals, and they're 99.99% of the planet's population. So we're basically, if somebody from another planet came down and saw what we were doing to most of the planet's population, they would be absolutely appalled, I imagine, unless they're doing it on their own planet. And that's the bottom line, is that we've been participating in a complete enslavement of most of the planet, most of the planet's population, who happen to be in other species, and that is no good reason to be doing it just because they're in other species. Just as there's no good reason to be exploiting and killing people in other races simply because they're different to whatever race we are. All of that kind of thing. Otherization is really at the core problems of a lot of what we do that is violent, our species. Anyway, but what I'm going to say about animal agriculture is in relation to Australia and the dire situation we're in relation to climate change, climate crisis, the climate emergency, is that we need to abandon that. We have to abandon this sort of exploitative and violent tradition and move forward. Animal agriculture in Australia is dead at this point. It is a dead-end, unsustainable, violent, practice that it might pull in a lot of billions of dollars for the government. But the government, even if you were behind closed doors, I am sure the government would be saying to one another, people in the government, we have to stop bailing out these farmers every time there's a drought, because the droughts are never going to end. In New South Wales, they sacked a person who was a drought coordinator, because he was telling the truth about the drought. Probably, I don't know what he was saying, but his first name's Laurie, I can't remember his last name, but they sacked him just recently because he was too straightforward about the droughts. The droughts are not going to get any better. And they can't continue, like they've been bailing out the animal agriculture industry for decades and decades, for one reason or another. And it's ridiculous. There are people killing themselves on these farms because they can't, either they're becoming in debt because of these loans, or because they can see that it's not working out for them. In fact, I think in the last few years, there's been about 350 women, Australian women, on farms throughout Australia who have killed themselves. It's that saying, that Zen saying, let go or be dragged. I mean, it's tragic that people kill themselves, right? But it's also, this is giving false hope by bailing out people in these farms. Rather, it would be much better in some ways if you think you have to bail people out. And mind you, who bails out other business owners except for banks? And who bails out people who fail in business? Usually, I don't know any small business owner who gets bailed out by the government repeatedly every time they fail. I don't, but they seem to do this for farmers. In a dead-end industry. It is time to bite the bullet and say the time for animal agriculture is over. The time to continue on this ridiculous practice that is sucking up huge amounts of water. And they've actually started a desalination plant near the Murray-Darling Basin, which is basically being drained of water, and fish are dying in the Murray-Darling River because of the cotton industry and because of animal agriculture. And they've had to set up a desalination plant finally, and guess what that's for? It's actually to help the fodder industry. This is the industry that provides fodder for the animals in these grazing animals. This is what that is. So they've spent $100 million or something for this desalination plant to help the fodder industry that feeds the animals. I mean, this is the insanity of it. Of course they should be setting up desalination plants all over Australia, because the drought is only going to continue. It's only going to get worse. The bushfires are only going to get worse. Eventually there'll be hardly any bush to burn. There'll be hardly any trees to burn. And in some ways, maybe the government, these right-wing governments, are probably happy with that. Then they can mine on it. They can, they love giving mining grants. They can frack on it. They can... they can make coal mines. They don't care. These people have got no sense of, they're either completely stupid or they think they've got a bunker they can survive in when everything goes up. The hubris of it, they're not going to be able to go anywhere. You can't escape the ecocide. You can't escape what's coming. And then when you look on Twitter, underneath one of the Greens MPs, the Green politicians, Adam Bant, you look under his, when he talks about all these fires being unprecedented, you get a whole bunch of probably who are paid trolls from the coal industry or somewhere, just bagging him, basically smearing him all the way down the feed. This is the sort of insanity we have on social media. And I've said, at this point, non-veganism is ecocide. If we are not vegan, we're basically participating in an ecocide. Because once the Amazon rainforest is gone, that's the lungs of the planet. And by the way, NASA has put out a report just lately that above the Amazon rainforest, the air is incredibly dry, and it's drying out the Amazon rainforest, which is going to hasten its demise. And it's probably drying out because they've been burning so much of the forest for animal agriculture and for soy to feed animals in animal agriculture. 90% of that soy or more is used to feed animals in animal agriculture. So this is the sort of insane planet we have. And then people wonder, then you get all these you hear of the psychology industry sort of wondering why, there's so many people now have these maladjustment disorders or depression, because we're being run by some insane people. We're living in a system that is dysfunctional completely, and it's absolutely detrimental to psychological and physical health. So when, so we've got, governments building desalination plants to feed, to give to industry so they can grow grain and hay, etc., to feed animals. The very industry that is a major cause of this climate emergency, they're actually giving money and building desalination plants to keep it going. It's like jump-starting somebody who's been dead for a decade. It's like trying to resuscitate something that is dead. It's desperate. And eventually, as I said, this Zen saying, let go or be dragged, eventually this government and any government is going to have to abandon this. But wouldn't it be nice, rather than be dragged, that we just let go of this ridiculous industry that is violent, that is unnecessary, and that is destroying our planet, destroying it, and sucking up resources. It takes 1,000 gallons to make 1 gallon of milk. It takes 7 pounds of grain to make 1 pound of beef. 7 pounds. You need so much plant material to feed cows and other animals. It's not just cows. And dairy cows are included in this, by the way. I don't know why people always just focus on meat as a problem, as beef and all of that as a problem. It's all a problem. Animal agriculture in all its forms is a problem. It's putting a tremendous drain on everything. And as I said, most importantly, it's violence to sentient animals, and it's completely unnecessary. Because as I say, we don't need animal products at all to survive. So, we're trying to jumpstart something that will keep it going when it's completely unsustainable. It is totally unsustainable. And if you've seen the show On Contact with Chris Hedges, the Pulitzer Prize recipient Chris Hedges has a show On Contact on RT.com, on RT. He did a show not so long ago where he was interviewing someone about how it's unsustainable that we're not going to be able to feed the planet with animal products by 2050, which will be 10 billion people. And so we're going to have to let go of animal agriculture because it cannot feed the planet. And like I say, it takes 7 pounds of grain to make 1 pound of beef. And if you've seen that, I'm going to show you that meme again that shows how much land would be left if we ended animal agriculture, and how we could feed the world already on just the land that we have. And that's not counting these continents that would be left after animal agriculture came to an end. This is from the largest study to date by Dr. Joseph Poore. And it's something, if you're denying that, you're a science denier. You're basically a climate denier, a science denier, if you ignore this study. The largest one to date. And what was their results after going to 40,000 farms, 119 countries, looking at the food from farm to fork, 90% of all the products we eat. And the conclusion they made is that a plant-based diet is a vegan diet is the single most important thing one can do to address not only the climate emergency, but also eutrophication, acidification, the droughts, the fires, and all of that. So it's time for us to let go of this dreadful practice. And, if you look at weatherzone.com.au, I have a look at that just to see, what the rainfall is going to be like, because I live rurally. I look at it to see the general weather, and that's where I find these articles about the Australian government, the stupid Scott Morrison government bailing out farmers continually. And it's been going on for decades now, but it's just ridiculous now. And so we've got to, and people, all these farmers keep getting this false hope, or they have no hope, but they keep trying to keep their farms going. And some have given up, and some are paid out to give up. But basically, the government still is trying to keep this ridiculous industry going. This is the insanity. And they're still trying to keep, they've just started, the government started it, there was a huge coal mine that started up north in Queensland, a huge coal mine. I mean, we're so backward now in Australia. This used to be sort of a fairly clever, used to be, well, there was even they even called it at one point the clever country, right? I don't think Indigenous people would think it was a clever country. It's started by genocidal people who don't really know how to look after the land. I'm not saying that Indigenous people here were perfect by any means, and they also killed animals and exploited animals, and at some point even, I think, I'm not sure about Indigenous people in Australia, but over in the US, Indigenous people actually made some species extinct. I'm not saying that Indigenous people, I don't have that same day, kind of adoration of Indigenous people, but at least they, that some people do, but at least they knew how to basically lived on the land like Australian Indigenous people basically lived on this continent for 60,000 or more years, and they didn't make any sort of mess really here, not even remotely. They tried to live as a part of the land, and I'm saying they still exploited animals, they still killed them, etc. And that's, for me, that's not living with nature or with other animals or with the land. That's more speciesism and human supremacy. But they certainly knew how to live with the land, and they would even do back burning. They'd even burn, do some do some windbreaks and stuff, to prevent fires from clearing through. They knew how to manage the land. Of course, we've just come in as the white sort of exploiters that we are, and we've not only tried to kill off most Indigenous people in a genocidal, rage sort of thing, in genocidal fervour, but we have no idea how to really live with this land, live with as a sentient being on the land like other animals. And that's what we should have been doing all along. But see, this is what happens. We think we're such a clever species, but look what we've done to the planet now. Not only have we overrun it, and that's a human supremacist thing, to keep populating and just ignore other animals, that they have a right to live in with some sort of semblance of some sort of habitat. This whole world is their habitat, just like us. But we've gone into overshoot and collapse, and we've managed to destroy and change the climate even. That's how crazy it is. So we are a destructive species, and forgive me, and this is not said with misanthropy intended, but it's obvious that we don't know how to live in peace, not only with other animals, but with ourselves, with one another. And it's probably time for us to go extinct. And I'd say that's probably going to happen, because it's pretty much too late at this point to actually reverse runaway global warming, unless somebody comes up with some miraculous thing, which I doubt is going to happen. That only happens in Hollywood movies. And I think people have bought that whole, a plucky band of young, good-looking people are going to sort of save the planet, or going to continue on the species and all this nonsense. It's going to be unlivable on this planet for probably a few million years or more. And no bunker is going to be good enough for any of these stupid oligarchs and so-called leaders, these politicians like Scott Morrison, who's actually younger than I am. Nobody's going to be exempt from what's coming. But we can do something right now, and we can go vegan. And if we go vegan, then we reduce demand for animal products. A little insect crawling on my shoulder there. We can end our demand for animal products, which means that will end the animal agriculture industry, and that will in turn address the crazy global warming climate crisis. That will help significantly address that if we end our consumption of animal products. So it's really demand and supply. If we become vegan, we end our demand for animal products, and then there's no need for supply, there's no need for these ridiculous animal agriculture industries or any of these horrific things. So it's up to us to do something. And and I don't see that Australian government is going to do anything to turn around this ridiculous these loans they're giving farmers and funding this animal industry to keep going, when it's absolutely a dead end and it's killing Australia, and it's contributing tremendously to the climate crisis. They're not going to stop that. So the only way governments are going to realise they need to find something else to do to make money, which can be easy with all the renewables we have here. But the only thing that's going to stop them now is for us to go vegan. And we should go vegan first for the animals and then for the climate crisis. So it's up to us to turn around this ridiculous industry. The Australian animal agriculture industry is dead. It is dead in the water, and it needs to end. And everywhere else in the world, it needs to end too, because it's causing tremendous destruction. It's sucking up resources, sucking up water like nobody's business. Absolutely ridiculous amounts of water animals need. And for what? So that then we can kill them and eat them? And they eat tremendous amounts of plant protein, and they eat tremendous amounts of plants. What for? So that then we can kill them and then we can eat them? I mean, it's ridiculous. So let's go vegan so we can turn this ridiculousness around, particularly in Australia. For goodness sake, it's insane. It's insane at this point. Everything is bursting into flames. Even here in Tasmania, which is one of the coolest states in Australia, the temperatures here are very, very mild. But even in Tasmania, we had that dreadful fire, these dreadful fires, which cleared just so much forest. It was really frightening. We have to, this is the future now. Every year now, I kind of dread summer. Every year now I dread summer, and every year I'm sure there are other Australians who dread summer. And the temperatures, not so much here, thank goodness, at present anyway. It might change. But the rest of Australia, if you look at the map in summer, the insane temperatures. These temperatures are being consistently high. I'm talking about, 40 degrees Celsius, 45, for a number of days. And people can't cope with that. I mean, South Australia is just appalling. If you look at that in some of the weather, the temperatures there, it's not livable at some point. It's not going to be livable. It is a climate emergency. And all these stupid paid trolls that are going around for the oil industry and the coal industry and all of that, shame on you. And all these stupid politicians who think that all that matters to them is their short-term political careers, shame on you for not doing anything. And that includes people in the Labor Party who seem to think you can do everything, you can have a foot in both camps. These are the people that are basically taking us over the cliff. But you and I can do something right now. We can go vegan, right? It's one of the best decisions you've ever made. And even at this point, it's a fantastic thing, and it's a moral imperative to do it. So let's do it, hey? Let's stop, making excuses, all these pathetic excuses, really. Like, I have a disease and I have to eat meat and all this kind of nonsense. Or plants are sentient. If you believe plants are sentient, then stop eating animals, because they eat far more plants than than vegans ever could. I mean, these are ridiculous, pathetic excuses. It might be one of the best decisions you make in your life. I've been vegan for 15 years now. 15 years early next year. It's a fantastic thing. And I'm so glad that I'm vegan. I think if I hadn't become vegan too, I probably would have died of diabetes or something, seriously. My family had, there's a history in there of diabetes and cardiac disease and stuff. And they're Western diseases from animal products, pretty much. So there are so many reasons you can go vegan, but the major one is because animals are sentient, they're not our property, they never were, and we need to live in harmony with them, because we're all earthlings on this planet. Anyway, thanks so much for listening. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Click the notifications bell, otherwise you don't receive updates when there's new content. My name's Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Vega. Thanks for watching. Till next time, peace out.
We're coming into what I think is the most dangerous fire season, dangerous build-up to a fire season I've seen since 1994, when New South Wales was devastated. And there's not even platitudes, there's just closed doors and closed minds as far as I'm concerned. That's atrocious, that our national government doesn't recognise that there's a disaster heading their way.
How you doing? Scott Roars. Nice to meet you. I worked with your mates in 2017 on the Pocket Fire. Oh, really?
When I started in this business with the forestry, our seasons, especially in this region, would maybe run 4 good months, right? Now, We start in April and we go almost to Christmas.
The most fire-prone parts of the planet are burning more and more. Here in California, 18,000 homes last year, 9,000 the year before. Previously, 3,000 was the biggest that they'd think of. They're just shaking their heads saying, what the hell is round the corner? I noticed the fire seasons were getting longer, there was less rain in winter, the winds are getting stronger, and the days of bad fire danger, there's just becoming more and more of those. Over the years I noticed this, and the fires are harder to fight, and people are saying now we've got major fires in New South Wales, we've had them in Queensland. These are months early, they started in August, but that's what's happening every year now. They're getting in Hercules, ex-military Hercules aircraft that carry 3 times as much water as their current aircraft. They're getting Black Hawk helicopters with 4,500 litre tanks for exactly the same reason, because the fires are just becoming uncontrollable. We lease heavy firefighting aircraft from here, the Ericsson Sky Cranes, the Elvis, people call them Elvis. We don't have them in Australia. So their Air Force of 23, one fire service, 23 fixed-wing water bombers. We have one in New South Wales. As each of the states and territories in Australia, their fire seasons heat up and start early. They won't be able to share trucks, people, incident management personnel. So it's going to be harder and harder to fight these fires. And we need a national response to this. Climate change is real. It's making it a more dangerous planet for everybody, but particularly in Australia, there needs to be a national response. You had 23 experts willing to sit down with the Prime Minister and come up with solutions, but he's just fobbed us off.